Well, hello everybody, this is Dr. Faske. I'm back with the third tutorial video of this year's set of ASBOA Junior High All-Region Etudes for trombone. Today's etude is number 30, page 16, from the Bordner First Book of Practical Studies for Trombone, published by Belwin Music. Before we dive into the actual tutorial today, I want to thank everyone who has reached out with so many great words of encouragement about these videos. One of the things that I have struggled with for the last several years is trying to figure out a way to give back in the best way that I know how. And this is allowing me to share what I know with the widest possible audience. And it allows everyone who, whether they can afford a trombone lesson or not, to actually get some help on some etudes. So thank you. If you have found these to be helpful and you've wanted to reach out, trust me, it's very encouraging to hear from you. So pop a comment down below or shoot me an email, something. Let me know if you find these to be helpful. And if you find them to be helpful, maybe share them with another trombone playing friend. That's one of the best ways to get the news out about these things is through word of mouth, sharing from friend to friend. So thank you very much. So as we segue into the actual tutorial here, and we're looking at number 30 on page 16, we're going to do the same sort of procedure that we always do. We're going to start top left corner, we're going to look at the same things, we're going to establish some information, and we're going to get started. So if I look at the top left, we are still dealing with bass clef, so it is the trombone etude. We have one flat in the key signature, and in this case it's F major, which we know and love. And then we have common time, 4/4 time. That's 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. Now above the first measure, we have the word maestoso, which I've always interpreted to mean majestically. There's a certain amount of pride and sticking your chest out when you play this type of music. It's definitely not shy. And so you want to play it in a manner that's consistent with that imagery. If you struggle with a musical style, try to imagine a person, yourself or someone else, embodying that style in your mind with your imagination. And I promise it will make your musical stylings that much better. So if I'm looking here at the beginning, at the dynamic, it's marked forte. And the best that I can tell, the entire etude is marked forte. Now we've all had those people in our lives who like to yell. Maybe they talk loud all of the time. And after a while, it not only hurts the ears, but it's just not what most of us would like to have, projected at us all of the time. So you're gonna want to try to find ways to have shades of gray of this forte dynamic. And I'm going to help walk you through that. Now, it's just one person's opinion. It doesn't mean that you have to do it this way. If you have a band director or a private lesson teacher that encourages you to play forte the whole time, and they can do that in a way that is not overbearing or overwhelming, then have at it. But I wanted to give you my take on this in a way that can maybe make it a little more nuanced and can make the musicality have that many more dimensions involved. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning. This one is strange in that the phrases are not as clearly delineated as some of the other etudes that we have. We have this eighth note figure that starts out in measure 1, and then it's followed by the dotted quarter note and then the eighth note. But then it's followed by the dotted quarter note, then the eighth note, then 4 eighth notes. It's not the same figure. It's a flipped version of the figure. And then in the third bar, we have 4 eighth notes again, then followed by the dotted quarter and eighth note. Then we have the flip of that. So measure 1 and measure 3 have the same rhythmic content. Measures 2 and 4 have the same rhythmic content. Then in the second line, we have the same or very similar rhythmic content for 3 bars. And the fourth measure simply rests on a half note F halfway through the measure. Now you'll notice at the end of the second line, you have a double bar, a fermata, and then underneath that double bar, We have the word, it looks like the English word fine. It's actually fine, which means the finish or the end. So take note of that. We're going to come back and deal with that in a minute. If you remember on one of the previous etudes, we had a little bit of a roadmap that we had to work through. We have a roadmap on this one as well. So if I'm playing through this opening section for you, one of the things that I have to try to figure out is where I'm going to breathe. And it is sort of a challenge here. I think the breathing is actually more of a challenge than anything else related to this etude. But I'm going to try to give you some of my ideas about good places to breathe so that you can have more than one option for how to solve this problem based on your lung capacity and your ability to take a big enough breath to make various size phrases. So here we go. That's the first two lines of the etude. Now you'll notice something that happens in the music that something goes away after a few bars. We have accents on every note in the first three measures and the downbeat of the fourth measure. And then there's a word written above the fourth measure of the etude. That word is simile. That word means play the following etude measures in the style of what is printed beforehand. So you want to bring those accented figures along with you. They just don't want to write them out on every note and every bar of this etude. So if you notice that what I'm doing here, I'm trying to project through the dotted quarter note. I'm trying to give energy through the dotted quarter note so that I can create a sense of musical line. Even though it's not a lyrical etude, we can still capture a sense of musical line in this etude. If I play the dotted quarter note short or breathe after every dotted quarter note, listen to what happens to the musical line. To me, it's just too choppy. There's too many breaks. There's too many holes. Too many places where the energy sort of stops. It's kind of like being in bumper-to-bumper traffic on the highway. If you've ever driven through Little Rock when they're doing construction on the highway, sometimes you're sitting there for a while, right? It seems like they never finish that construction. And you don't want your playing of a technical etude to mimic bumper-to-bumper traffic. You want to have longer stretches of road where you can drive, longer phrases of music that you can play. So even though we're giving accents to all of these notes, we can still give the longer notes the length that they require to create that musical line. Often we get the idea confused that a lot of front on a note means that we have to play a note short. If we're talking about an articulation, we're only really talking about the front of the note. The sustain, the note length, and the release, that's not the same discussion. It's a similar discussion. It should be discussed in the same conversation. But just because we accent a note does not mean that we play all the notes short. So if I'm going through here and trying to figure out where I'm going to breathe in order to create that musical line, maybe we breathe every other dotted quarter note. Let's try it. I like that so much more. And if you really want to be ambitious about it, maybe you can speed it up a slight bit without losing the maestoso feel and play the whole first four measures on one breath. It might be a good practice to do, even if you ultimately don't perform it that way, because if you overtrain in that regard and then you take one breath, life gets easier. Let's try it and see how that goes. So I had struggle with that. Now, to be honest with you, I'm literally deciding in the middle of recording this video that I was going to try to do the 4-bar phrase. If I have a little bit of time to work on it, I'm sure that I can get that. But I know that for myself, it makes much more sense to break it down into smaller sections, and the style allows us the room to do that, as long as we don't just chop everything off and make them short. Now, in my opinion, the second line of this etude, where we have more repetitive motion, I think we can actually come back on the dynamic a little bit. Just a little bit. Like forte minus or mezzo forte plus. So we can give ourselves a little bit of room to lead all the way to the fine at the end of the second line. Let me see if I can demonstrate. That's one way to do it. You could also do 2 measures up and 2 measures down. But you want to give some sort of shape to these phrases other than just loud the whole time. It's going to be more interesting for the listener, and it's going to be more interesting for you to practice. So, that's the fine. That's the end of the etude. Now we have 2 more lines. So if we follow the roadmap of this, we play the first 2 lines, then we play the third and the fourth line, and at the end of the etude, we see DC al fine. In a previous etude, we had DS al fine, and that was del segno. Played back to the sign, and then to the fine. This one, da capo, the head, the top, the beginning. Go back to the beginning and play to the fine. So we're going to play the first 4 lines of this etude, or the entire 4 lines of the etude, and then go back to the beginning and play the first 2 lines again. And that's going to give us, in essence, a 6-line etude. So if we start here after the fine, you have a fermata. So you can clear the air. You can give yourself a second to sort of collect your thoughts and get ready for the next leg of this journey. So what I would recommend that you do is that you do that. You take a second or 2. Don't feel like you have to keep the metronome going and not have any break at all. Let me see if I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. So that's the etude in its entirety. Now, we're going to go back and talk about the last 2 lines and how to incorporate it into the overall framework. I actually think of this middle section, this is really what it is, because you have the first 2 lines, that would be maybe the A section. Then we have the second 2 lines, the line 3 and 4. And then we have lines 1 and 2 that come back again. So we're dealing with A, B, A, much like some of the other etudes that we've had. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the third and fourth line and using it as a sort of move away from home a little bit. There's accidentals in here that aren't in the other portion. We're obviously in a slightly different key area. We're flirting with the idea of modulating, even though we don't really technically modulate. But then we come right back to what we have at the beginning. And we can't come home unless we leave, right? So I want you to think about how you can use that second half of the etude, or that second half of the printed etude, the B section, the middle section, in a way to sort of set up the return to the top of the etude playing out to the end. So when we're dealing with this second half of the etude, starting on line 3, it's really, really important here, and it's really important throughout everything that we play, that our half steps are in tune with each other. Now, one of the ways that I know how to work on this, anyone can turn a tuner on and put it on the stand and play every note with the tuner. And if the tuner gives me a smiley face, or the needle is directly above, directly straight up and down, then I know that I'm in tune on every note. But that's not how the real world works as a musician. It's not really, it's not what we do when we're in the heat of the moment, because I don't believe that you're going to have a tuner on your music stand looking at that while you're looking at your etude. If you can successfully do that, then I want you to send me a video or come and play for me. We have to find a way to make our pitch creation, our pitch, our tuning, a more intuitive, connected, natural thing that we do with our playing. It's not enough to just tune the F or the B flat on the trombone and say, yay, I'm now in tune. We have to make sure that all these half steps are correct. So if I'm looking at line 3, the A natural that starts the line out, that's second position. We're going to agree that based on the harmonic series, it's regular second position. Well, the E that immediately follows it is in a slightly lowered second position. It's not in the same place. And the D sharp is a half step below the E, so it follows the same tuning adjustment that the E follows. So we play the A in second, the E in slightly lowered second, the D sharp in slightly lowered third, back up to the E in slightly lowered second, back up to the A in regular second. So if I'm playing through this slowly to get comfortable with these adjustments, I want to make sure that I'm doing that with each set of eighth notes that has half steps. Anytime I have something that is a half step based chunk of music or motive in the music, I really want to make sure that all those are locked in. Another example of this is the beginning of the fourth line of music. We have G in fourth position, and based on the harmonic series, that's in regular fourth position as well. But then the D that immediately follows it, guess what? It's slightly lowered fourth. The C sharp follows that tuning tendency. We go back to the D and then back up to the G. So in all of these contexts, you want to make sure that you know what adjustment to make and where to make it. Now there's a couple of spots that I want to talk about in the last line that I think are important. The first measure of the fourth line, the low G on the upbeat of 4, we have a 4 and then a 1-2 in parentheses. The 1-2 in parentheses is euphonium fingering. You're going to worry about that fourth position, low G. And then we have what could be potentially awkward if you don't have a valve on your trombone, if you don't have a trigger. You're going to have to reach for that B natural in 7th position. So give yourself the time to work on that slowly so that you can do it both ways. Because I have seen it happen in audition settings where a trigger, tink, breaks right before you walk in the room. And if you are prepared, you can play it the other way, whether you have a trigger or not. So I hope that this little talk about Etude number 30 is helpful for you. I'm trying to keep these a little bit more, they're not brief, it's a 20-minute video probably by the time I'm said and done with everything. But I'm trying to give you an overview. I'm trying to start the conversation and get you thinking about the various elements that you have to consider. Remember that we're dealing with F major, so we need to practice the F major scale. Multiple octaves if you can, 1 octave if you can't, 1.5 octaves if that's possible. Every little bit that you can add to that is going to make your etude experience better. Practice with a metronome. Find a comfortable marking that's in the ballpark of what I was playing here today, or slower. And then remember that when you get comfortable with the performance tempo, kick it up a few notches past where you think you'll go in the performance room. If you want quarter note equals 88, practice it at 94 or 96 so that 88 becomes more comfortable and it's not the ceiling of what you can do when you're playing through the etude. I hope this helps. If you have any questions or you have any comments, please put them in the comment section below. Tell your friends, and if you think that I've earned it, give me a like and a subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Take care, and wolves up.